Let's hope we
Ooh.
don't have the cacophony of last week.
Let's hope we don't have the cacophony.
Oh,
Cacophony's
I
a
think
fun
we
word.
went live just as I said hi, which is good.
Nice.
So it didn't
Very good.
capture the stuff earlier.
I'm just waiting to see if this come up.
Awesome. How is everybody doing? Welcome and good evening.
Hello, everybody's. Yeah, well, he said, welcome and good evening. How is everyone? Hello, cat. I've got a cat on my arm. So you can go.
That's fine. Jan showed me something just before the stream. He's just managed to put together a little demo for us, which I'm going to be really excited to show off in a bit. With some stuff in Godot. I'll leave it like that. So it's a bit of a mystery for everybody. But I hope you're all
it's
very
the thumbnail. It's not that much of a mystery. Like I think they're expecting
Well,
it.
it could have been. It could have been.
Hello, Roderick.
Who saw the
Hello,
thumbnail?
Atomy. Hello, Caboodle. Can I have my arm back?
Ooh, demos. Hello, Melicon. How you doing?
Yep. Yeah, so the demo, should we start talking about it? Or do you want to talk about other stuff first?
Yeah, let's dive into the headline topic first. I don't want to tease people for
So
too long.
I've been looking at the procedural generation for the level design, and I'm putting it that way because quite a lot of the systems in our game are going to have to be procedurally generated if we're going the roguelike tradition. So what we have today is not the system we'll be using, but it's a first pass at one of the systems. I've used a backtracker algorithm, which if you've played Godot Getaway, you'll be familiar with. And what this does is it basically creates a maze. It creates a grid of rooms and creates a single path between any 2 points. So every room has exactly one way to another place. My nose is itchy. So Michael, would you like to show it off?
I would, and I shall try not to fumble too much.
Ooh, and Iscat wants some water, but Iscat, the show's just started. You have to wait an hour.
So in front
me.
of us here, it was you, yes. Ta-da! I've actually switched over so Yang can see what we're doing as well. That's always a good thing.
Ooh.
And yes, so I need to run just this scene. So this is... I was shocked when I saw it go. So we've still got some music in the
I'll point out
background.
whether the slowdown for the rooms generating was put in deliberately so you can see it happening. This happens in one frame.
And for the keen-eyed amongst you, press space to regenerate the level. And look at that, we've got a new dungeon. And I found a feature earlier, didn't I, Jan?
You did, but I knew about it too.
So we can refresh and we get different dungeons each time, which is absolutely awesome. How is the dungeon laid out, Jan? You were saying something earlier about how the doors are placed.
Okay, so what's happening is the first thing that's happened is, well, actually, if you go back to the inspector, so close this.
Boop. There we go.
Click on the PCG root node. And in the inspector, you'll see we've got width and height. You can change those parameters.
Oh, nice. To like 90 by 90?
You could try, but I've put 20 as the maximum.
Oh, he knew I was going to do that, ladies and gentlemen.
Yep. So if you press thingy on that, it'll generate. So what it's doing is first, it's placing all the floors. Well, actually, no. First, it's deciding all the floors. Then it's drawing a path. Now, in this particular case, the camera can't see far enough, so it's no good.
The clipping distance needs to be altered, yes. Because...
We can change that.
Yeah.
To be honest, you can't actually see the route anyway, but that would be an insane level. I'll actually talk about why we're not using this and why this isn't a good level later.
Yeah.
But what's happening is first we're going to pick from the allowed floors. So I've told it these are the floor tiles. Pick one of them and rotate it. So you can have one of 4 positions. Then it's going to go through every single position. We're not using a grid map this time, so I'm having to abstract it a little bit. So 0, 0, 0, 1, 0, 2, it's got the width and the height. It'll go through all of them. And it'll say, okay, so here's my map. Move them all to unvisited. Start at current, which is 0, 0. Remove that from unvisited. We've visited that now. Pick a random direction you're allowed to go to. And subtract the wall in that direction. And from there to here. So subtract the wall, replace it with a door. And then it's going to go through. Once it's gone through the entire map and there are no more unvisited tiles, then it actually generates the walls and doors. So it does the whole thing in concept and then it spawns everything. There's no point spawning walls and then removing them. The downside to this particular thing that I've done is that each wall and door is actually duplicated because this is a proof of concept rather than how I put it in game.
Yeah.
And here is Mikey showing that if you spam Go faster than once per frame, you'll actually get duplicate floor types.
So, which is kind of cool in itself. It alludes to the idea that you can have different things in place and therefore have quite unique rooms as you're generating, because we can put in place some nodes to say, oh, you can spawn coffigans. That's a mixture.
Coffigans?
Yeah, coffigans. Sarcophagus. That's the word I was trying to say. Professional. And pillars, you can have different
Well, these
variations
aren't
on
actually
pillars.
sarcophagi. These are altars.
Oh, are they? Okay.
Sarcophagi are props that we can place in later.
Oh, nice.
Because we have a separate sarcophagus thing. There are some serious downsides to this, and the main downside we have for this is Cat's thirsty. No, the main downside we have for this is it's actually not a very interesting level design, because what we've got is a series of square rooms
Yeah.
and a single path to the exit, and you've got to find it through. We've created a slightly boring maze.
Okay.
So this is probably not the algorithm we're going to use, or if it is, it's going to be heavily tweaked. One thing I want to do is probably start with corridors and then start replacing. So maybe I'll use a backtracker algorithm to place corridors,
Yeah.
and then replace random corridor pieces with rooms.
Yeah, that makes sense.
We could also play with height. I don't particularly want to, but we could. But once all that's done, I want to start generating the content for each room. So each floor is going to have spawn points that will allow NPCs to come in, or furniture, or decorations, or loot, or whatever else we want.
Yeah, brilliant. Governor's just asked that question about the environment inside the rooms placed randomly, or are they part of the room piece? So that was perfect timing, because I think that answers.
Was perfect timing. Assuming you don't mean environment as in lighting, yes, that's what we're looking at.
Yeah.
What I want to do though is make each of those have its own rules.
Yeah.
So I don't want to just be like roller dice. We don't want random. I've lost YouTube.
It's still there for me.
Good. Iscat is making terrible noises. He's apparently very thirsty. It's okay. So I've been reading this book, and this is a really good book, and I recommend it. It's called Procedural Generation and Game Design, edited by Tanya X. Short and Tarn Adams. It's really cool, and each chapter deals with, like the aesthetics in procedural generation, when to and when not to use procedural generation. And one thing that every contributor makes sure to mention so far is there is a massive difference between the feeling of random and the freedom of procedural generation, or as one author put it, things should be random in their circumstances, not random in their output. I should feel like this room makes sense. So if I walk into a room and there's 7 bookshelves and some torture equipment, there'd better be a compelling reason for me to think this room makes sense.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. That was one of the big kickbacks. We were just chatting before the stream. Things like when No Man's Sky came out, it lent heavily on procedural generation, and for a short time, I think it did kind of knock people's faith in what procedural generation could actually achieve. But you ended up visiting worlds where the animals didn't make any sense, or the planet didn't make any sense. So getting that right, so you end up with a world that makes sense, is really, really important.
Important question from Pakost. Off topic for the end. Why are the headphones crooked? The headphones are not crooked. My head is crooked. I'm recovering from a cold, and I had an ear infection, and my ear is a bit sensitive, so I put this ear in a slightly different position so it doesn't hurt. But there you go.
Perfect.
Now that's straight.
Yes. Oh dear. Why? Why are more people tuning in now?
I have a master's in the science of education.
That should have been the thumbnail.
It will be next week. Someone's going to clip that.
Oh, that's perfect. So yeah, lots of exciting news on sort of like the back end of stuff that's going on with Godot at the moment.
Yeah, and honestly, especially with things like procedural generation, it's such a radical departure from how the whole thing has to be structured that you really need to stop and redesign the game from scratch. It's a bit like adding multiplayer. It's not as bad as adding multiplayer, but you can't just be like, I'll just put in some rooms. Like, if you want that same crafted experience, then you have to know exactly what those rules should be.
Totally. And it really helps make you think about how the game itself is going to be played and how it's going to be structured. That's going to be you forevermore now, isn't it?
Yeah.
I thought you just sat on them at some point and oh, multiplayer. No.
Why are these? Oh, I see what's happened. That's fine.
They were yeah. I can't look now. So yeah, we've got some more news on LMMS as well. So moving on from Godot for a bit. So LMMS, the music part of the action RPG,
Or
we
loons.
are hoping to start recording the content for that next week. That's the start of it. I've been through. I'm just going to bring up my notes real quick because I thought the progression would interest you listening and all those that are listening. I just got to find it because I'm prepared. Oh, it's not being shown because it's under more projects. Brilliant. So yeah, last week we talked about how we're going to focus on structures. So the whole course is going to be governed by structures acting as a framework to help you produce music. Frameworks are incredibly useful, whatever you happen to do, because they often constrain what you're trying to do, and therefore you can focus on the things that are important.
Right, it's more like a scaffold than a restriction.
Yeah, definitely. One of the things that I often tell modelers is, give yourself 10 minutes, give yourself 20 minutes, give yourself a strict time limit, because then you are genuinely going to focus on what's important on this model. If you give yourself a day and you're only doing a sketch, that's too long for a sketch.
We talk about this in the Creativity for Coders course as well. Like, adding a restriction means you don't get choice paralysis. You have a route to go. Anyway.
Yeah, and
so
many times I've been caught with that, especially when adding instruments. So, of course, the beginning of the course is all going to be about getting the LMMS all set up, giving you a tour of the interface, and doing your first piece. I am keen to make sure that during the first section we get a piece of music out. It's not going to be something overly complex. It's probably just going to be percussion. So some sort of rhythm track that we can then build on or use in other parts of our piece. I think that's a great way of starting. All music books, when you go back to very basics, they start with rhythm. That is like a core foundation. And we had a question last week about time signatures. So we'll include things about time signatures and how, not necessarily how to use them, but how they can change the feel of a piece of music. Because how music is in games and films, it often changes the way in which you feel what's going on. We've mentioned it on several streams already. I gave Jan a piece of dungeon music that was creepy and scary. Changed the whole feel of the game. Had a couple of xylophones in there when the skeletons come out, and you've got a completely different feel to the game. So that'll be mainly section 2, how we're focused on all of those things. Then we'll go into more about these structures that I've been talking about, delve into why you'd pick one over the other, how they can link together. We'll talk about keys in that as well, so relative minors, majors, and I won't bore you all now with those sort of details.
Harmonic minor, yeah.
Yes, it's like major, minor, harmonic, minor. We will mix in theory, as you probably gather by the way I'm talking, as we go through the course. The last thing I want to do is front end theory, and then you forget it by the time you want to use it. That's not a great learning experience, and it's often what you end up doing in traditional music learning. You kind of get to about grade 5 with instruments, or certainly in the UK, I've only got that grading system to go on. And then you get this, you either do theory or you can also do practical musicianship. I did practical musicianship because theory, I thought at the time, was boring. It's actually really, really useful. But again, it's all loaded in and you kind of learn about all of this stuff. And unless you put it into practice, it's just stuff. And then you visit it later.
Tentacruel said, when he's talking about how he didn't actually start learning music theory formally until he'd been playing for 10 years, at which point he realized he'd already been doing this, he just didn't have the language for it.
Yeah, the formal language. There are a couple of sites that I've already got keyed up. They've got a glossary of descriptions, so if you forget what an ostinato is, sure, just go look it up. I mean,
it's a flightless bird.
Yes, why not? That buries its head on the moon. We'll go on to themes and variations. So themes and variation is something that's used a lot in films. Just think of, the intro to Jurassic Park.
It's
John.
Joey Bellicott's question.
Oh dear. Are you going to teach the proper word to steal from Gustav Holst? Oh yes. How did he know I was about to talk about John Williams?
What a shock.
But yes, stealing stuff is absolutely fine as long as you're not actually stealing it. If you're using
Please
it as
don't clip
inspiration.
that out of context.
Nah, it's fine. Yeah, I don't want to go down that rabbit hole. We went down that last week. And then finally we'll be putting all of those things together and thinking about how we can create a dynamic piece of music that you can then in game adjust. So we will have like let's take the dungeon for example. You could be walking around the dungeon, and then a piece of extra music comes in when there are enemies around, when you're in battle, when the sword's out, it might be different from the sword away, or axe, whatever you've chosen. You could also do a similar thing on the surface. If for instance, the hidden axe had a zone around it where some mysterious music came in to indicate there was a hidden treasure somewhere, you can all use these things to as affordance in the game, and I think things like that would be
There's also
awesome.
a nice crossover, and this isn't part of the course, but it's something that go off and do your own research after
Yeah.
you've done the courses. Procedural generation in music, like there's nothing to stop you writing certain rules and saying generate the music based on these rules, and like putting those rules in the game. So the easy one would be like you're within range of this axe, but it might be, for each enemy in area, chance of this music coming in increases by this, or bring in this instrument or one of these instruments. Like the more rules you create, the more dynamic rules you create, the more you create the content. Hence
Yes,
procedural generation.
And in many ways, the experimentation when you're writing your own music is very much using algorithms that have already been made. That I mean, the framework is a rule set that we'll be following. So we might pick, I don't know, might pick the circle of fifths. That Pachelbel's canon, if you really wanted to. For an example, I'm not going to do that, but as an example, if you stick to those rule sets, you're actually kind of all the chords are now defined for you because you go through a certain motion and you get to the end of it. Certain genres of music are built around very, very rigid frameworks. In fact, I think all genres are. I mean, we mentioned last week that genres are a way of selling music, but as humans, we like categorizing things and putting them in pigeonholes.
If you want to see a really strong example of that, I'd say look at classical minimalism. Look at something like Philip Glass, where you've got one phrase that's going to have tiny variations following the same rule.
Yep.
Going for a very long period of time.
A great example that people might be aware of, 12-bar blues would be a great example because of it's literally the same 12 chords over and over again until you finish the music. That's a simple rule set that you can follow. So yeah, I think they're going to be really useful and give anybody who's new to music something to hold on to as they're going through, so that they're not struggling to work out how to move forward. As you said, you don't suffer from choice paralysis as we're going through. And I as always will be saying, right, now I've taught you that, go off and do your own thing, which could be scary at first, but we'll get there together.
Yep. So yeah, it's I mean, both with music and with procedural generation, it's really figuring out what kind of effect you want and what's the best way of creating those rules. See how I tied it together?
Very good.
I'm very self-conscious about my headphones now.
I don't know why. They are perfect. Just go side on to the camera, then no one will know. Not the headphones, you muppet.
As you said.
Is this what it's like working with me? Like,
no,
yeah,
it's much worse.
Oh, perfect. So yeah,
the crumble sponge strikes again.
Where did that come from? Dominic Crumble Sponge. Was that
When we
going to
were
be
at dinner,
Yes.
and we were reading the dessert menu, and they hadn't put any punctuation in, so we just read it as one thing. So Crumble Sponge became a thing, and then we decided it was the actor Dominic Crumble Sponge.
Not the lead character anymore. Arya replaced him. There we go.
So yeah, I was very worried that I wouldn't have anything to show for today because we're doing a lot of work for the past week or so on procedural generation, but it's all behind the scenes planning and document work and coming up with different ways of doing the rule set. So I'm glad we got a little demo in, which I got working like 20 minutes before we went live on the stream. It was working. The doors were just random, so it wasn't working, but it was working.
And then it's up there. Yeah, when it comes to getting the LMMS content, anybody who's got early access, you'll start seeing the videos drop, and I will announce that when that happens, so you can go ooh and run in. I'll probably have a lead up of a couple of videos, so you don't just like watch how to install MMS. I'm sure most people will cope with that, but it's always good to.
How will they go? How will they go? When they see the videos, they'll go ooh.
Ooh. I don't listen to myself. That's everybody else's.
It's very musical.
Torture. Ooh. Yeah, so the first one will be just getting it up and running and installed, and different instruments as well. So there are a couple of freebies. Unfortunately, we can't host them, which is a real shame.
That's a shame.
Yeah, because I'd like to put them all in one place. But I'll make sure the links are there so people can get some great sound font instruments.
Unless you want to make your own sound font.
I did when I was younger. That was lots of fun, but that's a different thing altogether. But also Contact, not Contact, that's the tool. Native Instruments have a series of instruments that are free. So I'll give, that's another option for instrumentation. And there's also Spitfire Audio have their BBC Symphonic Orchestra, but it's the free version, but you have to wait 2 weeks to download it, which is a little bit awkward. But if you want to get a heads up on that, then go and download all of those things ready for it.
Yep. Someone just reminded me of the sound effect from Food Fight. Oh no!
Yeah, you were Discord did a good job then unmuting you.
Ooh, no. But high pitched.
Just speed that up and you'll be fine.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm really looking forward to seeing you come through with the LMMS. Mike is saying we'll be recording. He will be. I won't be. I'll be dealing with this stuff. But I'm looking forward to seeing how the course looks, and I'm really looking forward to seeing what you guys make. Because one of the cool things about this is seeing okay, here's the basic technique we're using for this. Here's where you could change it. Here's your personal twist. Here's
definitely
the places you can find instruments, and now go off and apply that and make your own stuff. So don't forget to share it.
Yeah, when it comes to instrumentation, much like when we're modeling or coding, it's great to find those free resources. And I've been using paid resources for quite a while, so I've got my own collection of paid-for instruments, but I can't use those in a course. And I certainly don't want to say, look at what I can create with like £1,000 piece of software. That's just not a great student experience. So we'll be focused on the free instrumentation that's there. One of the things that can change how a piece of music feels is the post-processing that you can put in, or the effects that you can use. A piano can sound, take just a really high-pitch note on the piano, can sound quite ominous if you just put a bit of delay on and a bit of reverb. So we'll play with effects in there as well, because...
Well, my favorite example is you take a guitar and you put distortion on it.
Now it's a rock guitar.
Yeah.
Or a metal guitar. Yeah, and even just different types of distortion, they're very distinct within the rock genre.
Pretty sure if you took any of U2's music and took away the reverb and the delay and played on a steel guitar, it'd sound very silly.
Probably would. That reminds me, one of the pieces I was working with the other day was using one of the guitar sounds that's free, that comes with, I can't remember what it's called now. Labs, I think it's called. But you'll find out more in the course. Yeah, absolutely.
Going back a bit, Pakosh said some path algorithms might come in handy. Yes, I'm looking at a whole bunch of different algorithms, trying to figure out what the best approach is. Really, I mean, the reason I'm really enjoying this book is they have no recipes in them, right? There's no, here's how you do minimum tree, what's it called? A minimum span tree algorithm, or a backtracker algorithm, or the whole algorithm. It's just, here's the approaches, here's why you use them, here's why you don't, here's what cyclic generation is. And it's great for saying, okay, so why do I use this? How do I use this? Which is the best approach? And how do I use it with something like weaponry or um, characters? Or, I mean, Dwarf Fortress is the gold standard here, right? So hundreds of years of history, including named characters over a continent.
Yeah.
Like, that game is insane with its procedural generation, but it just shows what you can do if you have the approach defined and you know what you're trying to do with it,
Mm.
and your systems are tight, and then it's just tweaking variables and leading to the infamous drunken dead cats scene in Dwarf Fortress.
That's hilarious. So Zach Wainwright asks, I understand this is far out of the scope of the game, but I've always wondered about how Deep Rock Galactic did it. I
I
don't.
actually
I
don't
don't
know
know.
offhand because I haven't played it. Well, I've seen it played a few times.
Mm.
Um, I would guess one of two things. I would get, well, my first guess would be Cellular Automata,
Hmm.
which will give you some nice caves. Um, but it could also be, I don't know the official name of this, but I was introduced to it as the Umber Hulk.
I love
And
this.
Umber Hulk is a great algorithm. What you do is you take one Umber Hulk and get him drunk, and then let him walk around smashing holes in the walls. And then when he runs out of alcohol, he'll fall over and go to sleep. So you get another Umber Hulk and put him there and just let him wander around. And end up with these big contiguous caves. I actually don't think that's how they did it. I would imagine it's probably Cellular Automata or maybe Perlin Noise, where you've got those smooth variations from 1 to -1, so that the next cell is more likely to be connected. I would be interested in finding out how they did it though.
Did their
What
maps.
image names? I just had to create a fork of faker for duck. Stick phone numbers. That sounds legit. That doesn't sound dodgy at all. I had an idea to make a pub name generator, although I didn't actually get around to doing it.
Oh, I love this. Yeah, you take
It
a
was a
couple
great
of
idea.
nouns.
I was going to go take. So the thing that slowed me down was ripping out the list of 200 most popular nouns, because I found a list of 1,000 popular nouns. It's like I really don't want to write a program to scrape these. I can't be bothered, so I'm not doing it. But you get a file of 1,000 or 200 nouns, and then the same amount of adjectives, and then there are two rules, right? Rule one is the adjective noun.
Hmm.
Rule two is the noun and noun two. And then you just generate a bunch of pubs.
Which is awesome. We thought
The bin and chicken, the
uh,
rampant hedgehog. It's
so
great.
so yesterday I was out for a walk in Newark, and we were walking near the castle ruins in Newark, and there's a pub, and I thought about this as we were walking past because it's called the Swan and Salmon. I'm like, what?
English pub names follow one of two rules: the adjective noun or the noun and noun two.
Yes, the Angry Bin. Yeah.
Do you pre-make caverns and then get the tunnels to draw? That's a good question. I know that um, Spacey Dwarfy mining game, I forgot the name of the game for a minute, Deep Rock Galactic, has set pieces. So they might mix the two approaches. They might have randomized caves with pre-made, handmade content in there.
It's
Because one of the things you can do with procedural generation is mix and match your approaches. You
yeah.
can make a very grid-based fortress that leads onto a cavern.
And you want that, right, in a game, or potentially want that, because you want the familiarity of going around a cave system and going, oh, this is a room that I've seen before. Chest is over there in the corner, cool. And so you get familiar with your areas, but you also want your I suppose you would call it a hero room. You know, where the final boss of the dungeon is going to fight. That would maybe a bespoke room that you go to. So you may want to put that in your level and let the algorithm pathfind to it.
Big Gamies, that's where all the cool people hang out. Yes, and also me and Mikey. So hi, folks.
Oh dear, you crack me up. We're both
Procedural
reading, aren't we?
generation is and is not complex. I mean, at its core, procedural generation is so it's not making patterns out of chaos, right? It's not I'm going to get some random stuff and I'm going to tweak the random till it looks good. It's
Hmm.
I want to get a certain effect or a certain feeling. How do I define rules to make that happen? So I believe Terraria does use Cellular Automata, but some of the key approaches are put everything in a grid, have everything splatter out organically, maybe with symmetry, maybe without. Um, have a bunch of pre-made assets and then the rules of how those link together. Um, and systems like that. And there's other ways you can do this too, like cycles, which was in Unexplored, which gets a whole chapter in this book, by the way, which is a really interesting thing. That's about we're not going to use procedural generation just on the map. We're going to use it for all of the gameplay elements. So all of the locks, all of the keys, all of the quests are going to be generated with these rules, and then the levels will be generated based on those. So we're going to go around in cycles and round and round and round.
Yeah. And of course, procedural generation, you can think of it very much, it can be used in anything. So with modeling, for instance, mirroring something, so you model half your model and then you mirror the other side of it, that's a form of procedural generation because you're taking the data that you've been given, the source data, and you're applying something to it. And that can be taken to the nth degree as well. During Godot Getaway, we made a fire hydrant, but the majority, and a crate, I believe, and the crate itself was 3 bits of wood, but it made a full 3D crate at the end of it. And the great thing is, once you've got your head wrapped around that, because it's a different way of thinking, because you've got to think about how your algorithm is going to work to construct an object or to construct a dungeon. I think that's the most critical thing. It gives you a different way of thinking about the world around us.
Gaming wants to know why you're in HD and I'm in 480. It's because I'm far less defined than he is. And also,
well
Mikey's hosting,
defined.
and I'm on Discord, so he's not receiving a high definition picture from me.
No, you're being crushed firstly by Discord and then by whatever YouTube does to you.
Yes, and then yeah. Let me get. I see that Zach is feeling a bit better about it, but an example of the Backtracker algorithm, which is what we're using in the demo that Mikey's about to show off again. What we're going to do is we're going to start by defining the size of the grid. So every room is going to be in that grid. And we're going to say all of these grids are just walls.
Mm-hmm.
And then we're going to tell it there are 4 things, there are 4 possible walls. There's north, east, south, and west. And that's it. So each one is a room with north, east, south, and west walls. We're going to start at one point, and we're going to say, get a copy of all of these rooms and put them in the unvisited variable. So we've now got an array of all of the rooms called unvisited. And we're going to remove the one we're in now. So we should remove current. And then we're going to say to current, okay, look at your possible neighbors and pick one at random. Remove the wall between you from both cells. So that wall is now gone. Now move to that room. That is now current. Remove it from unvisited. And we're just going to go through every single thing until everything is visited. And then we end up with a room where every single cell is connected exactly once to every other cell. So you can get to any 2 points. You end up with a pretty predictable kind of a maze, and it has a certain kind of feel. But from there, you can start tweaking rules, adding spaces, cutting extra walls, switching out rooms for corridors. So, Mike, if you want to show off the thing.
Yes, I was just going to add to that as well that when you are, you can use procedural generation as part of your construction. So you can run procedural generation and then pick your best levels and then add manual stuff on top of that. That's one way of approaching it, rather than runtime procedural generation. There is a slight difference in how you would use those. And during that mumbling, I've got everything ready, which is awesome. So I need to push these 2 buttons at the same time. Seamless. Seamless.
Nailed it.
Wop, wop.
Nailed it.
Where is it? Doing? I don't know.
Son.
I thought it was open. There we go. Ta-da! So the great thing here, for those who missed it right at the beginning, because it was quite early on, we've got ourselves a procedural level.
And this is the algorithm I was talking about, right? So the first cell is the one next to the stairs going down. That's our 0, 0. And the first thing it's going to do is it's going to create a grid, which is width by height.
So in this case,
so it's just going
to...
It's 2 for loops, right? It's 4 x in width, 4 y in height. And it's just going to populate them all with an empty room.
Oh, off by 1 error. Haha.
I cheated it, but yeah.
Sorry.
Well, I don't want the minimum to be 0.
That's true.
That's
Otherwise,
why I did it that way. Yep. Um, then what I do is I tell it, okay, create an array of vector 2s, and I'm going to use each of those grid positions as its identifier. If it's not an array, it's a dictionary. So a dictionary with a key of 0, 0, 0, 1, 0, 2, all the way up to whatever that final thing is. Once I've got that, I'm going to say, okay, um, each of these has 4 walls. And then I'm just going to run the backtracker algorithm. So the
yeah,
current cell is 0, 0. Pick one of the allowed directions, which is either north or east. Remove the wall and replace it with a door from both cells, because they both have to do it.
yeah.
And then just keep going. And then you've got yourself a little grid.
I really like this. And of course, as I discovered, if you spam the space bar, you can get lots and lots of pillars.
I mean,
I'm
the
so
reason for
mature.
that is I'm calling the reset on space.
Yeah,
But if you tap it faster than once per frame, then the reset will happen before the queue free happens.
yeah.
Could I make hallways that travel to regularly shaped rooms? Yes, you could, but not with this algorithm, which is why this is not going to be the algorithm we use. This is a starting point. Um, this is too regular for me,
Yeah.
right? This doesn't feel like a sprawling dungeon. This feels like a 1980s dungeon crawler. The ones I grew up with as a kid, like Maze Runner, or Maze Runner is the gold standard there,
Yeah.
which is just a grid with a bunch of walls, and you just have to find your way through it. But you can absolutely use algorithms that do that. One way you could do it is by saying that each grid is bigger than the rooms themselves,
Yeah.
and then have pre-made grid shape or irregular shaped rooms, or just say some rooms don't have walls between them. Like these are options available to you.
Yeah, you can create quite wide open spaces by using the same algorithm, just not saying add a wall.
Mhm. Plenty of ideas for a game using procedural generation for non-town content. Yep, me too. I'm looking forward to it. What kind of shadows are there within the rooms? We are using a single directional light with a single shadow. The shadow is purple. You can use the Wilson algorithm for that. Yes, you can. There's lots of cool algorithms. Um, it's actually great fun to look at the different algorithms that are out there. There's some wonderful videos on them. Cellular Automata is one that I really enjoy because you can run it a certain amount of times,
Mm.
and the more times you run it, the more open the space becomes, and you end up with these giant water carved limestone caverns. It's really bad for this kind of dungeon because it's so organic looking. It doesn't look at all like any piece of architecture.
Yes, that's going to be quite a going to take up quite a few days, I should imagine, trying to find one that suits the style of game that we're going for.
I suspect we're not going to have one that suits. I suspect it's going to be two or three put together in different ways.
Nice. So
And
a
that's
layered
before we even get
approach.
to things like quest generation. One of the things we have to do is when we get to locking keys, which looks like it's coming, and those kinds of quests, I need to make sure that the key can be reached on this side of the locked door. That has to be one of the procedures. You know, where you place the key cannot be random.
So do you place the key first and then the door after the key to make sure?
Well, you still need to track, can I reach this from the
Ah,
starting room?
very interesting.
Or make some doors, maybe you can't get them, or you can come back, or all keys are identical and you just have to be lucky. Or maybe some rooms can be broken down if you have a certain type of weapon, or, you know.
Or you've got that ogre that you were talking about earlier. Punch.
Yeah, I'm also thinking that the floors or the rooms themselves should be pre-made, and each room should have its own rules. So one room
Yeah.
might, for instance, be a library. So it's going to have a bunch of different bookshelves, places where you can put bookshelves. Each one can spawn books of various kinds, and then maybe there are tables, maybe there are chairs. There's places where those things can spawn, and the furniture algorithm will decide what goes there. But the
Yeah.
next room, it might use furniture, but it's not going to be bookshelves. They're going to be in a different place. It's going to be a very different feel. Maybe there's a store in there, like a shop. Each of those is a slightly different set of rules, but once you've got them in place, you attach them to that room. When that room spawned in, it's going to know, okay, this is where it goes. And then we're going to do a similar thing for torches. Torches have to go on walls and probably not over a door.
It would be a very bad one. Of course, we could also have a chandelier in one of the rooms, so the light source is nowhere near the walls. There are lots of options.
And we do have those little braziers that sit on the floor.
Yeah.
I'm trying very hard not to sing chandelier.
Why?
I don't know the lyrics.
Oh.
Water's waiting from the chandelier.
We apologise now, folks. Chandelier. Ah, dear. I say I apologise and then I go and do it again. I'm 5. What can I say?
Yep. Yes, we will need to do a pathing system to figure out where the key and the doors go. There absolutely needs to be a pathing system. Unless we decide that we don't want that in our game. Maybe there is a chance that you just can't open this door. If all doors or most doors can use any key, maybe you're going to come back later with a key.
Yes, but
then you have to make sure that critical information or critical paths aren't behind locked doors.
When's it hitting your SoundCloud? No time soon. Although we have threatened to release an album several years on the road, on the trot.
We
now,
have.
in a row.
Mikey and Yan's a cappella mistake. The a cappella apocalypse.
Acapella lopolyps. Yeah. Where's the any key? Love it. Yeah.
Yep.
Having a key that breaks. I like that idea that a key can open any door, but it breaks upon its use.
One thing that the guy who wrote Unexplored points out is key, and in fact a door, don't have to be a literal key and door.
No.
It could be a lever, it could be a plot point, it could be a spell, it could be a rune, it could be the phase of the moon, it could be a lava pit, it could be a door, it could be a portcullis.
Human Fall Flat is a great example of that, where it is just gated content throughout, and you beginning of the game, it trains you to put boxes on pressure plates. But that could also be another player on the pressure plate, and then you could drag the box through to the next.
Yeah, and just leave the player there forever.
Yes, yeah.
They've got a new level out, I believe. We should play that at some point.
After stream party! Maybe not today.
See we have our celebration tomorrow.
Celebrate good times. Come on.
Chandelier!
Yes, so and I said we'll find some time to go out. Why do we even have that lever?
Roderick asks, is it pronounced lever or lever?
Anyway. I saw a I hate to admit it was a Tic Tac I was watching earlier that was sent to me because
visions of you watching a small breath mint.
And so they were talking about pronunciation on there, or pronunciation.
Pronunciation.
Yes, that was good pronunciation of pronunciation. So, but a common, if something's commonly said incorrectly, then it's just another pronunciation of that word. I'm going to get everybody
example
to
I used to give, because I used to teach public speaking as an adjunct professor in New Jersey. And one of the chapters we had to cover in the textbook was correct pronunciation, which really annoyed me because I don't believe that that's actually a thing. I think it's very dialect-based, very cultural.
Yeah.
And it's to do with coding. It's to do with coding from the educational point of view. Changing the way you sound and the way you act based on your circumstances. I don't speak to my bank manager the way I speak to Mikey. I don't speak to Mikey the way I would speak to a student. I don't speak to a student the way I speak to my cat, right? You change it. And it's actually a lot more subtle than you might think. Like, you wouldn't go in with an NWA t-shirt swearing a lot for a job interview unless it was at a hip-hop podcast station, in which case you might, right? It's very contextual.
To actually answer the question, what's happening tomorrow night, we're going for a meal just to celebrate the Kickstarter.
Yes, we are.
Yeah.
But yeah, the example I gave them was, which of these is correct, to ask a question or to ask a question? Because ask a question is older. That's Chaucer. ask a question is later, but it became the correct answer because people who look and sound like me decided it was. So
No, it was funny because I was having this very, very discussion earlier on, just after breakfast this morning, chatting with a friend who had come over, and we were saying that we were talking about different ways of approaching and talking to people. And I used to service computers for a living, and I'd have, all manner of people. And I am going to do a couple of accents here, but I'd have very posh. Patrick would call me up and he'd go, "Oh, hello, Michael," and I'd be like, "Oh, hello, Patrick. How are you? Wonderful day." But then Dave would call me up and he'd be like, "All right, Mike. How are you?"
like,
And I'd go,
"Oh, hello, Dave."
but I wouldn't. I would, you as you say, it's coding. You would change your language as we go. And what are we talking about? Welcome to the random section of the show.
Well, it's a procedurally generated live stream.
Yes. Did you not?
We have certain guidelines, and then we just let it run. I think we may have to tweak the parameters on this one, but
Yes, music and accents in one show. You are blessed.
so the nice thing about getting these systems not written down but defined before you go, and knowing the different kinds of systems, is that when we get into things like questing or character names or character generation, because if we're doing a roguelite, we're going to have to generate characters and character classes.
Yeah.
When I say generate character classes, I mean like this. You can pick one of these characters, and this one is heavy weapons, this one is light weapons, this one is magic, and this is their name, maybe a little backstory. Rogue Legacy and Rogue Legacy 2 does this really well. Here's their name, here's their class, here's their magic spell, and here are some extra things they might have, like vampirism or agoraphobia.
I got confused when my friend read as red, and when I read as read.
I got confused. My friend read as red, and I read as red. As a Britain states, yes, no, I was that for 11 years. One of my least favorite. Okay, I was driving. I had a 3-hour drive to work, so I'm driving to college from one end of New Jersey to the other, and I've got a migraine, and it's raining and it's cold, and I just pull over at a Wawa, which is a convenience gas station, the Sad Clown store. Wah, wah.
Wah, wah.
So I walk up and I get a coffee, and I go to the counter, and she says, that's $1.25. I say, "Thank you very much." She goes, "Oh, can you teach me how to have a cool accent?" I'm like, "Yeah, go far away. It's not a skill. Give me my coffee."
That's very true.
The next stretch goal, yes, the next stretch goal is a cool accent.
100%. Very off topic. Okay.
The problem I have here is the word "she" can be pronounced lots of different ways, and I don't speak Chinese well enough to know which tone to use. So,
Yeah, which inflection is going to be rude? One of them.
well, it's not so much that. Is what is wet lion food? Is that supposed to dry lion food? We've got lion kibble and we've got lion whiskers.
I was thinking cat food. Yep. I don't think I would eat cat food.
I mean, my cats would.
Yes, hopefully.
It does have tone markings. You're right. But I don't speak Chinese well enough to know tone markings. I used to teach kids in China online. A few years back, the Chinese government changed its policy, so now you can't hire foreign tutors who don't live in China to teach English. Which means that my students no longer make fun of me when I try and say words in Chinese that they're trying to teach me.
Is there an outline of the topics that would be taught in the action RPG? I'm wondering if anim trees are part of the curriculum.
Yes, they are. Yes, the Trello is probably the best one, which Michael is going to link.
I'm sorry, there's an earthquake happening here.
Not here, you'll go through a tunnel. Bye. Yes, there is an outline on our Trello, which I believe is linked on the
it was linked somewhere.
Site. We can find it for you. But yes, we're going to teach anim trees because we have to. We have to teach how to do things like switching between the animation states and Currently, the way the attacks work on the player is we're actually layering two animations on top of each other. We've got an animation for the attack over the animation tree.
So I think it's this one here. I'm just going to check it in incognito so it works rather than just.
Iscat, don't destroy the bathroom, please. Iscat is thirsty. I know, buddy. Iscat's thirsty and he wants me to turn on the bath water for him so he can drink it. But I'm doing a stream, so he's just sitting there going.
It's like, you've got a stream. I want a stream. Right. Let me close that. So yes, one thing to note here: this isn't. This is a list of things that are at completely different levels of abstraction. There we go.
What does that sentence mean?
So some are really narrow, very specific topics. Some of them are wide out, and there's some stuff at the very end. Go with all this. No, thanks. It's just trying to sell me stuff. Just load Trello. There's some stuff at the very end which isn't included at all. And of course, these roughly line up with the stretch goals at the very top. So the action adventure begins, the overworld character classes all fall under there. And I can't scroll at the moment. There we go. Procedural generation and roguelite. That's where we got to at the...
Are you sharing your screen?
No.
Okay, cool.
Just saying procedural generation and roguelite, that's where we got to with the actual Kickstarter itself.
Yep.
We're very, very close because we've still got funding going on our website. So if you know anybody who is interested in this, Jan will now post the link to
You weasel.
to the project, the ongoing funding. Sort of like we've called it the pre-order. So we're very close now to character creation. We're less than £500 away from it, and we're running this until.
Be right back.
And we're running that until I can't remember offhand, but yes, we're running that until I think the end of November, if I remember correctly. Unlock more stretch goals. Boop. I don't think it's gone up. I didn't get a chance to update it today. I do apologise. If it has gone up, I will update it later on. There we go, back here. Now, can everybody see the link that Jan's popped in? You should be able to see it. Hopefully you can. But yes. So if you know anybody who's up for that, forward it on. I mean, it's covering so much now. And we're very close to character creation. Character creation will basically mean that not only will there be extra characters in the characters pack, so there'll be an extra asset pack as well, but we'll actually be going through the process of creating your own characters. Should be awesome. And at that point, we're going to add in some more custom animations as well when it comes to dodging, rolling, and also customization of the character themselves. So we would be creating our characters in such a way that in-game, you can switch out body parts or make them larger or smaller, shorter, taller, etc.
Rounder, squishier.
Suaver, swishier.
Facebook, Twitchier.
And stop right now. Thank you very much.
Yep. There is a typo on the page under all three learning paths. It says FOMR. That's a new word we've invented specifically for the course.
No, it's just Norse. I've been watching too much Vikings. It's fine. It's fine. But thank you. I'll get on that after the stream and fix it. Fantastic. So the official number from Kickstarter is actually on Kickstarter's page. I believe we had no failed pledges. I know some people were having.
Well, some people reached out to us because they.
Yeah, but we actually had no failed pledges, which is absolutely amazing. So thank you everybody for that.
And we are sneaking towards the hour, so we should probably start asking for questions and comments and impersonations and songs about toucans.
So one thing that I've been on a sort of journey of self-discovery when it comes to games recently, I've been trying to work out what I actually like about games, and of games I enjoy playing versus games I don't enjoy playing so much. For instance, I've decided I don't like Ark. I've tried it. I've tried it plenty of times. I just cannot get into it. And I don't know whether it was the time investment. That was probably part of it. But I also felt like it was a lack of agency. Recently, I've been playing a lot of RimWorld, where you have indirect control over characters. And this is where the lack of agencies come around, because the characters do things almost like The Sims. They do things indirectly and often that make no sense.
It's very like Dwarf Fortress. You don't actually control the character; you give them orders.
Yes, you act as a sort of a deity looking down. So I think it's games that lack agency, because I definitely like first person shooters.
I don't know that I would say that Ark doesn't have agency because it's very sandboxy. I know what you mean, but I don't know that agency is necessarily it.
No, so it's what
like
I've
this.
grasped. I'm still grasping at various terms to describe what I don't and don't like.
No, I hear what you're saying, and I
Yeah.
think you're onto something.
I definitely like sandbox games. I mean, things like
So to me,
Minecraft.
agency is the ability to affect the world around you,
Yeah.
which you can definitely do in Ark,
Yeah.
but very differently to the way you can in RimWorld. So there is something there. I just can't put my finger on it.
Well, I love Minecraft. And I like playing that with the kids, and I like creating stuff in it. It's very nice for that sort of thing. And I also like certain themes. But for instance, I absolutely love space, loves Kerbal Space Program. Can't get into Elite Dangerous or any of the X series.
Big Gaming is doing proofreading for us. Thank you. Does the concepting course fall under the Blender Action RPG course?
Blender Action RPG course. Yes, it does.
Yes, it does, because it'll be done in grease pencil, I believe.
Yes, I believe that's what Paul's going to use.
FOMA is not a typo. It definitely means Flight Operation Management Room. Yep, which is very important when you're in a dungeon.
Yeah.
When
When
you
you're
air traffic control underground.
Underground traffic control.
Below the most cooler.
Okay, you can stop now. Stop. Okay, so part of no, I'm not going to make excuses.
We were tired.
There is
We've been working flat out for a month, and by the time we wrote that, we were like, "How's it look? Yeah, it looks good. You sure?"
I will say this: it's not an excuse for all of those typos, but the one of the things with Teachable is when we want a custom page that doesn't fall under their specific formula, it needs to be done in their custom HTML editor, which doesn't sound like the end of the world until when you click to edit a word or edit something, it goes, "Oh, you wanted the end of the line, did you?" No. Click. Oh, and it only it's an absolutely horrible mistakes are allowed. I am human, 100% human.
I'm not.
Actually, I'm clipping that as the thumbnail and changing it afterwards. Just Geo Nodes may feature if it's appropriate. A word on Geo Nodes. Geo Nodes in version 3 of Blender. So I'm talking specifically about Aaron's part of the Blender Creator Suite, because we've already got a Geo Nodes course. And he's just added sort of a video at the end describing how fields are now being used in Blender 3 versus Blender 2.93. I believe there is a plan to create a version of that course using the new field space system for Blender 3. There's no time on that at the moment, though. There's no schedule on it. Specifically because Blender 3 is still in alpha. And Nodes is one of those things that's changing daily. We've mentioned this like with Godot 4. We don't want to create a course that's so short-lived it doesn't serve anybody.
Which is one of the reasons why we're doing this in Godot 4 rather than Godot 3. Because with Godot 4 entering beta at some point soon, by the time we finish, getting all the prototyping done, if we
It's
release it in Godot 3, it'd be useless because people could watch it for a month and then be done. So this way we can do everything and then translate it to Godot 4 and do it again. Gicastro, can Geo Nodes be used in video games at all? Or is it just an art thing? I don't understand what they are. No, Canopy Cast hasn't been shelved. I realised I've still got to finish a couple of the videos on there, but that's on my docket for this week.
Forecastro.
Geo Nodes are just a way of modeling in Blender that
Is procedural.
is procedural. It's just a different way of modeling. It's exactly what you. It's exactly the same kind of output you would get in Blender with a different method. So rather than creating a mesh and modeling it all together that way, you create the rules and Blender creates the mesh.
Yeah, it has already existed in Blender for quite some time. So, for instance, if you were making a fence, you might create a post, and then you might use an array modifier to repeat that post several times. You would just do the same, but in a node-based format rather than a modifier. That's just a very small example of what the geometry nodes can do, but geometry nodes is much more powerful because of the way you can link these all together. The modifiers stack, as it was called, is just a stack of modifiers on top of one another. So you could link some of the parameters with drivers. I think I even show that in Godot Getaway, where you're changing one particular parameter on the buildings. It's when we're doing the buildings, because the top of the building's a separate model to the bottom of the building and then the floors in between. When you change how many floors a building has, the top has to move. So you change its position based upon the number of floors that are on there. So that would have been not easier, but more obvious what was going on. Before in Blender, if you were just using a modifier stack and you'd linked it together with drivers, you don't know where any of those sliders control. They're not linked together visually. But now they will be if we were using Geo Nodes.
Zach, you should take the course. If you already own it, you'd enjoy it. Could they be imported to game engines? The final product will be is importable. You can export it as a DAE or a GLTF or
you
really
can't export the nodes. It's very similar. Yeah, it's very similar to materials. You can export a material from Blender to Godot to Unity to Unreal, but most of the settings don't come across. They need to be reset up in that specific render engine. We're very, very lucky. It didn't used to be like this with Blender. You used to have, I can't even remember what it's called, but Blender's original render engine and Cycles. There were two different render engines, and I think it was called Blender Render, actually. But they were two separate engines that didn't talk to one another at all. Eevee, which is like the real-time rasterization engine within Blender, and Cycles are very similar. And the Blender devs have done an absolutely wonderful job of making it so that if you've got a material in Eevee, it will roughly work in Cycles. There are some things that don't quite work like that. Reflections, for instance, are nearly impossible to do with screen space reflections. It's gone dark, Jan.
The lamp branded batteries.
Wah, wah. And so, yeah. The main thing that's different between Eevee and Cycles is the lighting. So you can't always swap out lights. You can swap out lights, sorry. You can't have a point lamp or a sun lamp in one scene and expect it to look. You usually look the same.
This is true whenever you're using a render thing. And people have mentioned this, like, why does a scene look different in Blender than when I import it into Godot? It's because they're using different render engines.
That's always going to be the case.
Yep. Because all render engines are an approximation for how light and physics work.
Yeah, even things
and
like
the more
Cycles,
accurate it is, the slower it is.
Yeah. Cycles, I mean, it's brilliant what Unreal have done recently with their Lumen engine. But that's using path tracing to add on top of, I believe it is anyway, to add on top of every other technology they've got. And I'm really looking forward to Godot 4 with its real-time global illumination.
With all
I can't remember.
SDFI?
SDGFI?
SDGFI LMNOP?
QRSTUV? I don't know.
Oh yeah, join the Discord, absolutely. It's a much easier way of getting help and finding people on the same page as you and just hanging out.
Yeah.
And on that note, I think we have hit the hour. actually just gone slightly past it.
Yeah. I'm just going to post a link for the Discord so you don't have to go hunting.
I'm going to put on my arthritis glove.
What does that do?
It stops my hand from hurting so much. Oh,
Almost.
oh that hurt. Yeah, my joints are not great today.
I keep forgetting. I've got an auto completer for text, and I forget the codes, so it's not very helpful.
It's interesting you say that, Bit Gamey. Many people mistake me for Gwen Stefani.
Well, that's why I had to ask, Zach, because I did think that's what I would think, that you put it on to have arthritis. Yeah. A bit like those suits men can wear to feel what it's like to be pregnant.
It's exactly like that.
It's a pregnancy glove.
The best thing about this is tomorrow when I see you and I slap you, it'll be fine.
I would just say you're being no.
No.
I'm going to be in trouble.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Has anybody got any final questions? Otherwise, we'll say goodbye for the evening and thank you for joining us. Damn, I've given away what I was going to say now.
Picking bones never a good sign. Yes, they're not a good sign. I have them in my hands, and my fingers, and my wrists, and my neck, my ears, and my nose, and my spine, and my hips, and my toes. My toes are really bad. Yeah, my body is getting old.
That happens to all of us. It's time, innit?
Long enough.
And speaking of time, it's time to say goodbye.
Speaking of the oncoming encroaching mortality that looms over all of us, thanks for joining us, everybody.
Oh, dear. That's brilliant. So look forward to seeing you all next week, same time. And yeah, it's been a pleasure spending time with you guys as well. So I'm going to get ready. Are you ready? No, don't do that. You'll cause yourself pain. But goodbye, everybody, and see you next week.
Press it.
No.
Press it.
No.
Press it.
Okay.